everyone. Who's been here for the whole teach-a-thon? Wow, I'm really impressed. Thanks so much. I think I'm the last speaker this afternoon. So what are the weapons of war? They are swords, they are bayonets, gunpowder, grenades, bombs, landmines, chemical weapons, drones, killer robots. I recently visited the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa, and I was fascinated, but I was also horrified to learn about the technology that changed World War I. Gases that made the enemy go crazy. Bombs or machine gun fire that would deliberately release shrapnel into the body so that skin and muscles could not be repaired. Weapons have changed dramatically over time, except one. One weapon that the museum did not feature in its exhibits was rape. This is one weapon of war that has not changed much over time. Rape in war is a constant throughout history. Some examples. Wars of colonialism, wars of colonization saw who knows how many Indigenous women raped in the Americas, indeed around the world. Who knows how many women captured and imprisoned as slaves were raped. During the Holocaust, Jewish women were raped in concentration camps, something we don't hear very much about. During the Second World War, at the end of the war, as the Soviet army, the victors, moved rapidly into Eastern Europe, close to 1 million German women were raped by Red Army soldiers in the latter months of the war. And some of my own research comes out of that era. German women, nor did Germany as a nation, talk about these mass deliberate rapes with a purpose of exerting revenge and victory on the defeated. These weren't talked about for years, for decades, because of course Germany was the enemy. Germany was defeated. We were unwilling to view them as victims in any way, but close to 1 million women were victimized by rape in that conflict. In their country's War of Independence in 1971, close to 400,000 Bangladeshi women were deliberately raped. In the war in the Balkans, the region of the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s, up to 40,000 women were held captive in rape camps. And this occurred on all sides of the war. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, ongoing horrific numbers of rapes in a war that is going on 20 years now, a war that has killed over 5 million people. Up to 1 million women have been raped repeatedly in savage ways, resulting in long-term medical problems, destruction of their vaginas, destruction of their uterus, their bladders, their rectums, resulting in long-term rejection, medical problems, and disabilities. This is also happening today in the wars of South Sudan. And as I said, this happens on all sides. We've hardly heard about the rapes by American soldiers of Vietnamese women during the war in Vietnam in the 1970s, 80s, nor about American rapes of women in their war in Iraq. This is just starting to be documented. We're not hearing very much about Syria at all, but it is happening there too, and especially in refugee camps that are housing the thousands, tens of thousands of refugees from that war. So it's not just one side, it happens throughout history. and it is still taken for granted, often never reported on. Women are the collateral damage of war. That's how it's been seen. But rape is actually a weapon of war. Well, how so, and in what way? In the past, and some of this continues in the present, for soldiers who aren't paid to fight, the rape, pillage, and plunder is their reward for service. Rape of women by soldiers has been viewed as a magic potion that fortifies soldiers for battle. I've heard soldiers not personally, but I've seen soldiers in the Democratic Republic of Congo interviewed, and they say this, even today, it fortifies them for battle. Primarily, rape in war humiliates the enemy. The rape of women is symbolic of the rape of a nation. Rape in war serves the purpose of ethnic cleansing, and we saw this particularly during the war in the Balkans and during the Rwandan genocide. It furthers the ethnicity, the nation of the victor, of the rapist, as individual and as a nation. When you impregnate women, when women become pregnant following rapes by the enemy, they give birth to the child of the enemy, of the victor. In Rwanda, where I think 500,000 rapes were documented in the aftermath or during the genocide there, the children born of those rapes were described as the devil's children. So ethnic cleansing is one reason rape is used as a weapon of war. It is used to control a community and a territory and to scare people off their land. Women and their families flee their villages out of fear of rape and are afraid to return. It also starves them because women are afraid to go out and search for food, to gather firewood in forests. Rape in war also reinforces and enforces gender inequalities that are often destabilized during war. It's nurtured by a culture of pornography and hatred towards women generally. Well, even more importantly, perhaps, I think the culture of war, in fact, nurtures a culture of rape in war. The culture of war encourages hatred and violence towards women and gender minorities. And I would say not just women are raped in war. Men and boys are raped. Non-conforming gender minorities are raped in war. War, in fact, relies on a strong emphasis on extreme binaries of gender in order to function. You need extreme notions of masculinity and femininity to correspond to the binaries of war and peace, of enemy and of victor. And this occurs both within forces, as we see and hear about the sort of endemic and ongoing sexual assaults and harassment that occurs within the military of both Canada, the United States, and around the world, and also towards the enemy. The culture of war depends upon and actually encourages a culture of hyper-masculinity, not a good, normal masculinity, but a masculinity that is characterized and reinforces violent aggression, the kind of hyper-masculinity that is needed to motivate soldiers to kill. People don't kill others naturally. The culture of war encourages soldiers to dehumanize the enemy, to create an other, and that other can include women. If we were in a regular classroom, I would show you clips of boot camp training in the US Marines, and I'm told it's the same in the Canadian Marines by students that I've had, where the language that is used to motivate soldiers and train them to potentially kill, strangely and disturbingly merges the language of the enemy and the language of women and the feminine. A culture of war nurtures the culture of rape in war because it necessitates a different morality than that held by civilians. You must nurture a different morality if you're going to encourage people to kill the other. And that different morality, not held by civilians, also allows for rape in war. The culture of war silences women by raping them, and thus silences activism against war as well. The culture of war offers tacit acceptance for rape, even today, for rape in war and blame of women. Why don't women keep their legs shut tight? I'm sure we must have heard that phrase in some of the earlier presentations that I may have missed. Well, what are the results of all this? Shame of women and others raped, of their families, of their communities, the breakdown of family and community, the rejection of women because of their experience and their ongoing physical and emotional disabilities, the rejection of women altogether, the prevalence of HIV and STDs, the children, the rejection of children born of rape. Why doesn't it end? Despite it now being considered a war crime, there is very little impunity for perpetrators, in large part because it is still considered a natural byproduct of war. And because we don't have the collective global and international will to change it. In conclusion, a culture of rape in war won't end until the culture of war also changes, I think. Thanks for your attention.